Welcome to She is Resilient, a podcast for women on their healing journeys who are ready to start living their most authentic and empowered lives outside of survival mode. I'm your host, Tatiana, trauma and somatic therapist, as well as a holistic coach, and I'm on a mission to help more women heal their nervous systems. Each week, me and my guests are going to get real and vulnerable about the experiences that led us to becoming the empowered and resilient women we are today. You'll leave this podcast with the skills, knowledge, and inspiration to start creating the life you deserve. Because if another woman can do it, so can you. Welcome back to She is Resilient. Today we have Delane on the episode. Delane, tell us who you are and what you do for a living.
Yes, my name is Delane, like you said, and I am a registered nurse and a breathwork facilitator. And I help perfectionist and people-pleasing women in their 40s break free from overwhelm.
Wonderful. So, as you know, this episode is all about sharing our vulnerable stories and talking about our healing journeys and how we got to be the amazing women that we are today. So, Delane, I'd love to hear a little bit about your story and how you got started in this healing journey.
Yes, thank you. So my journey actually starts about 12 years ago, and I was coming out of a very painful marriage, and I saw a counselor for the first time. And I had never really been taught to talk about emotions or to really go inside me and discover what's going on, discover what makes me tick and why I do the things I do. And so, working with a counselor, I felt like I did a lot of healing and I had found so much more happiness in my life. And then I eventually met my current husband, and we built this beautiful life together. And I had a stepson, so a child for the first time, which was really exciting. And somehow I missed that whole thing that so many people go through of a challenging stepchild. I hit the stepchild lottery, and he's the best. And so we
Oh.
immediately bonded, and he's a sweetheart. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, it was just like everything lined up. All of a sudden, life was beautiful and it was what I wanted. And it was kind of, when you have that fairy tale dream, it was like, this is what I wanted.
Mm.
And then right around 2020, everything completely fell apart. And that was when I had really a almost like reckoning that I really hadn't done any healing.
Mm.
I had some awareness about myself and I had some understanding about myself, but I hadn't really gone into my body, into my soul, and really healed anything.
Mm.
It was just that, yeah, I had kind of put a band-aid over all of it.
1000%. You bring up such a really good point because I think that so often that's what happens, right? I think
Right.
so often people spend years in talk therapy and they're like, well, I already talked about these things. I've already processed them. I'm healed. I don't need to revisit what's happened in the past, and then something happens, and then we have this reaction in our bodies, and we're like, why is my body responding in this way? Why am I feeling this way? I thought I healed already.
Yeah. And it really is. It's like you have this ego kind of jump in at first, and it's like, no, you've healed. Like you know this. And you just have all of this like, "Ugh, please, like I spent years going to therapy, like I'm good."
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really that's not what it's about. It's really creating that safety and healing within your body and
Hmm.
really starting to notice that um everything about you changes
Hmm.
because you're no longer so affected by trying to prove your self-worth and trying to show everyone that you mean something, and yeah, it's an interesting dynamic for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm curious to know for you, what was coming up for you? What were some of the symptoms or the emotional or physical symptoms that you were experiencing when you were like, wait a minute, I thought I healed already.
Right. Yeah. So It was really a collective of things, because I had a very layered experience. When everything came unglued, it really came unglued. And
Mhm.
um, so for the first part of this, it was 2020, and I was a nurse in the hospital, and I had a leadership position. And so the pandemic hit, and being in a leadership position was not a fun place to be when that happened. And then I also did do the bedside nursing as well.
Mhm.
And so, in that respect, and in that aspect of my life, where I started to notice these differences, is that my resiliency just tanked. I had always thought of myself as this really strong person and I can take anything. And then, when there was all of this uncertainty, there wasn't a way for me to create safety in my body any longer. And just everything felt unsafe. And I went into that sympathetic nervous system activation, like we talk about with the fight or flight. And
Mhm.
I just lived there. That was what happened. I basically every single day it was like hypervigilance of what's going to happen now? What's going to happen now? What's going to happen now? And waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then um, in my home life, my husband had had some traumatic brain injuries. And so he was really struggling with mental health. And so
Mhm.
again, that resilience piece is coming in. I'm getting so much anxiety worrying about him. And it was almost like a snowball. Like it started small and it built and it built and it built and it built over time.
Mhm.
And again, I'm still unable to create any safety. I would
Mhm.
be home and I should be, it's this, I mean, what had previously felt like a haven and an escape and this
Mhm.
safe place with two people that I love very much. I couldn't even get that feeling of safety there.
Yeah.
And just constant worry and overthinking, and the brain just did not stop. And then I
Mhm.
stopped sleeping, um and then yeah, like the everything with my stepson became challenging too, because his middle school closed because of the pandemic.
Mhm.
And then his mother had a bunch of things going on at the time, but she was looking at, it looked like she was going to have to move away. And so we were
Mhm.
trying to navigate, okay, how do we split time so that he gets to see her, he gets to see us. And then we're doing homeschooling because we had to.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it was just all of those things coming together. And then um, really the next layer upon that was my father was diagnosed with two different types of cancer.
Mhm.
And so that was the final straw of nothing is safe. Like,
Wow.
why do I even try?
Mhm.
Everything's fallen apart. My life has fallen apart, and there's no purpose to even care about anything anymore. So,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, and I
That's
really
all.
shut down. I mean, shut down. And
Mhm.
yeah, that was the depths that it went to was just um I mean, I don't even remember it. Most of that time I don't remember.
Yeah.
I think I sat on the couch a lot and
Mhm.
stared at the wall, and then just, did the necessary things that had to be done, but then went right back to sitting and staring.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Your nervous system was functioning from this autopilot. And
right,
I think this is a perfect example of what happens when we are so stimulated or we're spending so much time in this sympathetic state, right? We
right.
will always resort to this state of freeze and shutdown, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's what was coming up for you. And so I'm curious to know, how did you move out of this state of freeze and shutdown? What was that moment where you realized, okay, something needs to change. I need to do something about this?
Yeah, I think that it was probably in like the late fall of 2020.
Mhm.
I just started to realize what bad shape I was in,
Mhm.
and just noticing that all these things that had been fulfilling before and provided me joy just didn't anymore, and that seemed really concerning. And my my husband's therapist, she does a lot of family work, and so she kind of incorporated me into her practice. And it was really nice to work with her because she was the first person that had ever really brought in somatics and helping me understand more of what's happening in my body. And so that
Mhm.
was kind of like the introduction to it. And then I'm the type of person that I don't do anything just like a little piece. Like if I get curious about something, I'm going to go crazy studying this thing. And so that's what I did, is just it was just nonstop for months and months of studying somatic healing and nervous system and trauma. And I'd already been I mean, the funny thing is, I'd been studying all of this for my husband with his traumatic brain injuries, and he does have
Mhm.
PTSD. So
Mhm.
I was already about 2 years into studying all of it, but
Mhm.
it just took on a different context when I was learning it for myself because it's different than learning it for someone else. When you learn it for yourself, you really have the perspective of everything that's going on. And
Yeah.
so it took it so much deeper to really
Mhm.
see like, okay, I tried this technique and now I feel it in my body, and oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally.
So,
And
yeah,
I think that, right, there's a difference between just knowing something and having that information and actually embodying what you've learned, right? And
right.
actually feeling and putting things into action. So it sounds like at this point you started to actually embody what you were learning, the knowledge that you already had.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's what's so interesting is again, like it comes back to that ego thing.
Mm-hmm.
I learned so many things, but like you said, I didn't apply it because I thought I didn't need it.
Mm-hmm.
And I can just tell you right now, if you're hearing this, you need it. Whoever you are, whatever life, walk of life you come from, whatever your childhood experience was, you need it.
Yeah.
I've never met a person who does not need it. But that's so funny. Well, we do. And yeah, I was just like, please, like I'm tough. I'm a nurse. I'm smart. I got this.
Yeah.
And then my life changed when I decided to question that and get curious about that. And yeah, it's been a game changer.
Yeah, I'm so curious how you started to put that ego down because that is, even saying this right now, I feel like it's a very vulnerable thing. And I think it takes a lot of courage to admit, yeah, that was my ego. And like, I felt like I knew all of the things, but in reality, I didn't, right?
Right.
And so I'm curious to know what helped you kind of put that ego to the side and really admit, like, hey, maybe I do need a little bit more work.
Yeah, honestly, I think the beginning was just the pain.
Mhm.
The pain had gotten to be so deep into just I mean, it was like I felt exhausted into my bones.
Mhm.
Like it felt like it was in my bone marrow at that
Yeah.
point of just
Yeah.
exhaustion had permeated every single cell of my being, and I knew that this was not the way I wanted to function. I felt awful, and so that's kind of started it, but then it was the little wins.
Mhm.
It was doing one technique and suddenly just noticing something I hadn't noticed before, or
Mhm.
just feeling just a little bit better, and then sharing it with someone, which was a beautiful part of being able to be a nurse. That
Mhm.
and I worked in pre-op and post-op, and so
Mhm.
I could literally go that day and share it with someone and be like,
Mhm.
"Oh, you're nervous about your surgery? Okay, try this." And so
Yeah.
it was like this beautiful ripple effect that I got to feel the benefit, and then I shared it with someone and they got the benefit, and it just kept reinforcing it over and over and over again. And then that just kind of crumbled the ego part of that, of just seeing
Mhm.
like, no, this is really important.
Yeah.
And it also, I think another thing that really impacted me was learning the different levels of trauma, because I had heard of like the big T trauma for the very big traumatic events, and then there's a little T trauma for the ones that aren't quite as significant. But then I heard about even like micro traumas
Mhm.
and how just like the little things can, and that's when it really started to resonate, because I'm one of those people who, and I encounter these endlessly in my work, and I'm sure you do too, that you meet someone and they say, but my childhood was great. It was great. Like, why go back there? Because it was great. And that's how I felt. It's like, my parents were so loving and so sweet. And
Mhm.
so why would I go back into my childhood? That doesn't make any sense. But
Yeah.
it really is like these little micro traumas that happened.
Mhm.
And yeah, even if you have the best well-meaning parents, they will still do things that can have a very deep lasting impact on you. And even
Mhm.
just little encounters, like kids are very difficult with each other. And
Mhm.
like one thing that has really helped me to get other people to understand what I'm talking about is um, it's it's this thing that happened when I was in fourth grade, and
Mhm.
I up until that moment was I had such an open heart. Like I loved everybody. I told them how much I loved them, and I just kind of walked around with this very big exposed heart.
Mhm.
And I had a crush on a kid, and he had just
Mhm.
moved to our school, and he was the cool guy. And so me being me and having not learned those filters yet when you
Mhm.
get hurt and when things happen. I was just like, oh, let's grab my friend. I was like, go tell him that I like him. Like, I want to hear what he has to say. And I was so excited. And so my friend went over to go talk to him. And then my friend came back and he was really quiet. And I was just like, that's weird. And so I kept pushing, like, what is it? Like, what did he say? What did he say? And he didn't want to talk to me about it. And then finally he looked over at me and he was like, he says that you're too ugly. And I
Mm.
was just like, and just devastated.
Wow.
And until that moment, I never knew that you could get rejected like that. Like I never knew the pain that could come from that. And
Mhm.
so even though when you look through that event as like an adult, it's like, oh, that hurt and that's sad. But no, that changed the trajectory of my life
Yeah.
because in that moment, I was taught that looks are everything.
Mhm.
And so I need to put all of my time and my energy and my effort into looking as pretty as I could because that's the thing that's going to get me love and get me accepted. And then
Mhm.
the other thing was it taught me, okay, close off your heart. Like
Mm.
you don't need to go tell everybody everything that you think and you don't need to be like so open about all this stuff.
Yeah.
You need to take a step back and chill out a little bit.
Mm.
And so it's just all of these like emotions and yeah, it played out over time and even got reinforced with other events. And so, yeah, that's how I was living my life over this one little thing that is a seemingly small event.
Yes, 1000%. Thank you so much for sharing that because I think
Yeah,
that so often we really have our logical brain kick in, right? And we want to just analyze and say like, "Oh no, that wasn't a big deal. Why am I still responding in that way?" But I think it goes back to your point of, you know, we have all experienced some form of trauma just because we are human. And trauma is really, it goes back to how your body responds. And when we think about what we experience as children, right? Like our child brain can't really comprehend the difference between, or not even just a child brain, but let's talk about all brains, right? All nervous systems where we don't know the difference between, or the nervous system doesn't know the difference between an actual threat or a perceived threat. And
right.
so, as a fourth grader, of course, your body is going to respond in this state of activation, right? And that might have been too much for your little body, right? And again, as an adult, we might say, oh, that wasn't a big deal. But again, we're using our logical brain, and the nervous system doesn't use logic. And
Right.
so I think it's important to remember that these micro experiences, like you were talking about, can really impact our nervous system and can really develop that trauma without us consciously thinking that it's trauma.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious to know, as you started to go through this somatic healing journey, what were the shifts that you started to notice, again, in your body, emotionally, physically, but also behaviorally in your relationships? How did you start to uh, show up in the world?
Yeah. So that's really interesting. And one thing that I've learned through the process of healing your nervous system is that whenever you get to a level that you feel like you're like, man, I'm doing great, then you can keep going. Like it literally just keeps your threshold just keeps rising and rising. And it's been incredible. And I think that first level that I noticed up or rising up was I was getting more resilient. I was getting my resilience back. And so that felt really good. And we still had so much chaos in my department at the hospital. And because we had a lot of people who were at retirement age when the pandemic hit. So a lot of them totally understandably quit.
Mhm.
And I don't blame them. And so that was just a whole nother thing is like now we've got to hire people. Now we're trying to figure out what to do with staffing. And so it led to this next problem, but none of that seemed overwhelming.
Mhm.
It started to just be like, okay, yeah, we're just going to keep piecing through this. And then as far as home life, I started to really almost picture myself more like an anchor for the
Mhm.
house. And because we had all been a little dysregulated from everything that had happened and it had been
Mhm.
crazy. So as things started to kind of come together, we started to figure out everything. Well, then at that point, we were able to we were able to kind of reorganize, but I needed to like ground us. It felt
Mhm.
like it felt like
Mhm.
I was the one that was going to kind of model the regulated nervous system.
Mhm.
And fortunately, my husband really got into all of this as well. And so
Mhm.
we've kind of been able to do that together. And so that's
Mhm.
been really cool to see is like as we go up, we're leveling up together and we talk about it. Like he can say, you know what, you don't seem very regulated today. Like what's going on? And I can do the same for him, which is really
Mhm.
helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really interesting to see the layers that you go through of just you think okay, I'm feeling so much better. I'm seeing so many of my patterns. And
Mhm.
then there's just a whole nother layer to uncover. And
Yeah.
one thing that I think that got uncovered in this whole process is I didn't realize how codependent I was.
Mhm.
I I knew I had some of those tendencies,
Mhm.
but when my husband went through all his traumatic brain injury stuff, it was so intense and there was so much going on. And I stepped into that nurse role and
Mhm.
kind of took over everything in the household.
Mhm.
But then it was like I got addicted to it. And
Mhm.
so as he starts to heal, as I started to heal, I didn't want to give it up. And so that
Mhm.
was another kind of egoic thing that I had to experience is I still wanted to if he's having even the slightest bad day, I
Mhm.
wanted to run in and save him. And I had this
Mhm.
whole heroic thing going on that was just
Yeah.
totally over the top. Um, but as my nervous system started to heal, I started to even see that. And I don't think that I could have seen that pattern before.
Yeah.
And so that was a whole nother layer of our healing is just me
Wow.
not having to feel like I need to be the hero all the time and always come to the rescue because I'm holding him back. It was the thing that
Mhm.
eventually I realized is I am literally stopping his forward progress because I'm trying to manage his moods and his triggers,
Mhm.
and that is not doing him any good.
Wow. Yeah. I think that's such a significant piece, right? When we start healing our nervous systems, we so much starts to align and so much starts to shift. Um, I love how you said that you had more tolerance to manage stress, and you're a nurse, and so it's always stressful at your job, right?
Right. Mhm.
But also just our daily stressors, right? We build that capacity to be with our with life, right?
Right.
And also, you started to gain more awareness, right? And I think that piece is so significant because I think, we can only show up to the level of our nervous system, right? And so we can't change what we don't have awareness of.
Right.
And as you started to heal your nervous system, you started to gain more insight, more understanding of how you were showing up, and you started to notice not feeling like you needed to manage other people's behaviors or emotions,
Yes.
which I think can be so common, I think, for women in general. But also when we start healing, right, I think we start to feel like we know a little bit more than other people. And we're like, oh my gosh, I can fix this. I know exactly what to do. I know exactly what you need to feel better. And I think again, healing our nervous system really allows us to take that step back and say, like, your emotions are your emotions, my emotions are my emotions, and I need to focus on what I can control, which can be
Right.
really difficult when we are in that dysregulated state.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I found it and actually that was one of my mantras too, that I would say I am not responsible for your emotions. Like I would literally tell myself that and I would just repeat it over and over again to my husband, to my stepson, and even to coworkers because I was codependent with coworkers and trying to solve all of their life problems and trying to help them with all these things.
Mhm.
And so and it only kind of magnified when I started diving more into all of this because then I
Mhm.
had even more tools and more key, and I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna solve everybody's problems. Get in
Mhm.
line,
Mhm.
and yeah, that was pretty wild to go through that. And I think the other thing that kind of came in when I was getting into the deeper levels of healing is I started to see how working at the hospital wasn't aligned with me anymore, and that was something I'd never questioned being a nurse. Like I just knew I wanted to help people and so I just signed on for the whole thing. And then I hadn't really ever spent time reflecting on, yeah, but do I really feel like I'm helping people? Is this really the way that I want to help people?
Mm-hmm.
And and that's one thing that I experienced that, and I've encountered that a lot of with a lot of my clients because I do work with women, and it's exactly
Mm-hmm.
what you said, is that we do all of these things because we've been told to do these things.
Mm-hmm.
And we have our routines and we have our expectations we put on ourselves. And as you start to heal your nervous system and create that calm and self-worth within,
Mm-hmm.
then you start to question all those things. And then that's when you can really start to kind of chip away at, well, what does align with me? What do I want to do? And ask
Mm-hmm.
yourself questions that we're not accustomed to asking ourselves.
Yeah, 1000%. I love that. And also, I don't think that we touched on this yet, but we were talking about this before we hit record. And you had mentioned that during this process, you had also realized that you started perimenopause. And
Yes.
so I'm curious to learn about that journey and how that impacted how you were feeling and how you navigated this journey as well. Hey there, if you're looking for daily somatic practices to add to your toolbox, I'd love to introduce you to my somatic bundle where I guide you through over 30 somatic tools and practices that support your nervous system by creating the safety that your nervous system requires to move out of survival mode. Just click the link in the show notes and you will get immediate access to my library of tools. See you there.
Oh, where do I begin? Perimenopause. I'm glad it's having a moment. Let's say that.
Mhm,
It was shocking because as a registered nurse, I hadn't really learned anything about perimenopause and didn't
mhm,
know that I was in perimenopause. It was someone
mhm,
else that pointed it out to me because I said, I have so much more anxiety, I'm having trouble sleeping, I'm having mood swings, and everything started pretty quickly. It wasn't, I assumed it was related to my stress that I was going through with all these other things, but it really was just a rapid onset. And that's when why my friend pointed out, you know what, you might be experiencing perimenopause. And I started to do the research. And then it was overwhelming of why haven't we been told this? Why
mhm,
aren't women talking about this?
mhm,
And it was just, oh, it was just so shocking to me to not even as a registered nurse be able to like know what was going on with my body. And
mhm,
so the thing that I think comes in to mental wellness and all of this is we have all these challenges just from life in general. And then when you go into perimenopause, so many of the symptoms can mimic different things like the anxiety, the lack of focus, the insomnia. So then it makes you start to wonder, is this an actual like mental health thing that I have going on, or is it perimenopause?
mhm,
And so I find over and over and over again, because this is now my specialty. Like I work with women in their 40s.
mhm,
And what I find over and over again is they're being misdiagnosed. They're getting sent to all these specialists. And
mhm,
so they may be seeing a doctor because they had a little fluttery feeling in their heart.
mhm,
And then they're sent to um, a some sort of mental health doctor. It could be a psychologist, it could be whoever they're sent to,
mhm,
a counselor they're referred to because they have anxiety.
mhm,
And then I can't even tell you how many friends that were feeling a lack of focus and feeling these symptoms that kind of mimicked ADHD. And so
mhm,
they're getting diagnosed with ADHD and then they're getting a drug for that too.
mhm,
But these are people that I knew them before. And
mhm.
before perimenopause, they did not have those symptoms. And
Yeah.
so to me, that's what's so troubling is that we're all kind of being thrown to the wolves the second we hit 40. And I mean, for some people, it's as early as 35.
Mhm,
Um, but yeah, it is a really challenging time of life. And then if you just start to look at when it happens, oh my gosh, it's at the time when you might still have kids at home.
mhm,
Even worse, you may be having teenagers at home. So you've got teenage hormones plus your hormones. Oh my
mhm,
gosh. And then you've got aging parents as well. And
mhm,
so there's just so many things that go into that. And then add on that the women who do have a career, lots
mhm,
of times in their 40s, well, they're pretty much into leadership positions. They're into things that carry a lot of weight. And so
mhm.
all of this just leads to complete overwhelm and confusion. And that's when you just don't know what to do anymore. And
Yeah.
it's a lot. And it's a lot for, if it's a lot for someone like me who's a registered nurse and I feel like had a pretty good grasp of things,
Yeah.
what's it like for someone who doesn't have that, who doesn't have
Yeah.
that background?
Yeah. And when you started kind of doing a little bit more research on this for yourself, were you already in your somatic healing journey, or was this after?
Yes, I was, fortunately.
You were
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And what was interesting is I really applied the somatics
Hmm.
when I had started perimenopause, kind of unbeknownst to myself.
Hmm.
And I had some GI issues, my whole gastrointestinal system was really temperamental. I
Hmm.
had insomnia, I had anxiety, and all of that went away with nervous system work for
Hmm.
a bit. And so
Mm.
then I did gut health because I'd also been told that that's a very important part of perimenopause. And so I did the gut health work and it went away again for a bit. And
Mm.
then it came back again. And I really, like, as someone who really promotes natural healing, and I don't want to get on all the meds and everything, but
Hmm.
I hit a point of like, I've done everything
Yeah.
and I'm still having some symptoms and they just kind of keep coming back. And
Hmm.
so I did end up choosing to do hormone therapy. And
Okay.
so I do a low dose of that. And now I am as resilient as they come. Like I feel amazing.
Wow.
And and so that's another part of it is that just this whole process takes time. Like it takes
Yeah.
time. And that's what, and it's so challenging because I got where I needed to get with nervous system work for the
Hmm.
longest time.
Hmm.
Like I would say I probably had about 2 years of just
Hmm.
really feeling great, just doing nervous system work. It was managing everything.
Hmm.
But then what if it doesn't? And you,
Yeah.
like me, start to have the symptoms again. They start to creep up again.
Hmm.
It's really, really just overwhelming to look at all these different parts that come into play.
Yeah. Yeah. And I imagine that the reason that the nervous system work only took you so far was because what needed to be addressed was your hormones, right?
Right.
And
Mhm.
so I'm curious to know if is hormone therapy kind of, I know that you said that you typically like to take the natural approach, but are there alternatives to hormone therapy?
There are. And, I tried a lot of different supplements. Like I tried
Hmm.
Chinese medicine supplements and a few other kinds. And again, it takes, you need to give it a month or two just to see if
Hmm.
it even works. And in fact, one of them recommended 6 months, I believe, that I
Okay.
tried. But yeah, you can just kind of work your way through different things. I mean, as soon as you start looking into it, the big recommendations are nervous system regulation, because that's
Hmm.
going to decrease your cortisol, decrease your inflammation, because
Hmm.
so much of perimenopause is about inflammation. And then
Mm.
when you get into the supplements, it is a lot of those anti-inflammatories and then just things that help to maximize your hormones. And so like there are different products out there that are kind of like a vitamin or a supplement formulated for that. And so you've got
Mm.
those options. And then gut health seems to play a big piece too. As your estrogen levels decline, it can cause all sorts of chaos in your gastrointestinal system, which I did experience. And then also, anxiety can cause chaos in your gastrointestinal system. So
Totally.
it's all
Yeah.
playing together again. And so that's kind of the approach that I recommend people take, is just
Hmm.
really try to take a holistic approach and do all these things first. But
Hmm.
I also realize like we shouldn't be judgmental about whatever path anybody chooses to take. And
Hmm.
there are some people, they don't have the time, the energy, or anything like that to actually go through that whole process. And if they
Hmm.
want to choose to start with the hormones, start with the
Hmm.
hormones.
Right.
There's no wrong answer in this. It's really
Yeah.
finding what feels aligned to you, what works for you, and makes you feel good about your decision.
Totally. Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. I feel like I need to have you back on the podcast so that we can have a whole nother episode just on this.
Right.
Um, I'm curious to know how you would describe yourself today. Who is Delane today?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think more than anything, I have found a deep, deep belief in myself that I am worthy exactly as I am.
Mm.
And I don't have to prove myself to anyone anymore because and I know you'll resonate with this too. And it's especially women, we just get so many standards that we place upon ourselves. because
Mhm.
of perfectionism and people pleasing and overachieving, all of these things. And I was chasing proof that I was worthy my whole life, unbeknownst to me. I
Mhm.
wanted to I wanted to have all of these achievements and things that I could show of, look, I am good. I am a good person. I am important because of this.
Mhm.
And then the people pleasing too. I feel like it's a just a terrible combination of when you get those perfectionism, overachieving tendencies, plus you're a people pleaser, then
Mhm.
you're really chasing that. And so it's
Mhm.
I'm I'm a good person. I give everything of myself, and
Mhm.
I'm going to be the best at this, and I'm going to be the best at this. And
Mhm.
it's all because I want you to like me, and I want you to approve of me, and I want you to see that I matter and I mean
Mhm.
something. And
Yeah.
I've been able to detach from so much of that. It just
Mhm.
feels like tons have been taken off my shoulders by
Mhm.
being able to get to that point and to just really feel that deep love and appreciation of myself. And
Mhm.
this is really interesting too. Um, and something we haven't even discussed, but like breath work has played such a huge part
Mhm.
in my
Mhm.
transformation as well.
Mhm.
And the moment that really made a pivot for me as far as this worth journey
Mhm.
was I did a transformative breathwork session
Mhm.
and I saw my trying to control everyone and
Mhm.
trying to control everyone's perception of me and just all of the control I was trying to exert on life. I saw
Mhm.
it as a plaque over my body and it was just caked on me.
Yeah.
And I could see that it was the thing that was holding me back. It was the thing that was keeping me in fear
Yeah.
and keeping me from, yeah, just moving forward. And of
Mhm.
course it's a practice, right? Like you're
Yeah.
not going to just wake up one day and be like, okay, I'm not going to try to control anything or anyone ever again. No,
Totally.
funny, that's cute. Um, but yeah, it that was the pivoting point. And so
Mhm.
then it was like this, I took one step back
Mhm.
from all of the control and all of the trying to prove myself. And
Mhm.
then I've just been able to take step after step after step after step. And
Mhm.
now my connection that I have to myself and just even my spiritual connection that fuels me is just
Mhm.
that's all I need. And
Mhm.
so yeah, I you'll like this. I when I first started in my journey, I went to a business conference
Mhm.
and I was so nervous and scared. I was shaking, like absolutely shaking, and I couldn't
Mhm.
stop shaking.
Mhm.
And I don't even drink that much alcohol.
Mhm.
And I rushed for the mimosa table and was just like, give me one of those. And I was a wreck. And I just got back from another business conference, and it's been years now, and doing all this
Mhm.
work and feeling all the self-worth within. And this conference was, I mean, this was like 1,000 people. And
Mhm.
I went into rooms where I didn't know anyone
Mhm.
and just walked in and had a great time and said hi to
Mhm.
whoever I wanted to say hi to and talked to whoever that I wanted to talk to and asked questions that other people were scared to ask. And it's
Mhm.
all because I've created this sense of self-worth within and learned to regulate my nervous system so that
Mhm.
I can feel what's happening in me of like, oh, need to take a step out, like do a few
Yep.
deep breaths, now
Yep.
come back. And yeah, it changes everything. It will absolutely positively change your life in every aspect.
1000%. Oh, mic drop. That was so good. That was so good.
Yeah.
Elaine, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, with our audience, and for dropping some wisdom. I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for being open and willing to, again, share your story. Tell the audience how they can connect with you, what you have going on, and how people can work with you.
Yeah, thank you. I am on Instagram at
Mhm.
Delane Benson Wellness. That's the easiest way to find me.
Mhm.
And currently my offerings are transformative breathwork workshops. And so I do those virtually, and then I also do them in person for people in my community. And then the next step up is I have a group program called the 40s Overwhelm Solution. And it's a holistic approach to helping women in their 40s just figure it out. And And so, yeah, we can do holistic health and talk about hormones, or we can go into nervous system regulation, which really is the foundation of the program. And then the other level I have is private coaching that I do with women as well.
Wonderful. And can they reach out to you by connecting with you on Instagram, or do you have another way that clients or potential clients can connect with you?
Instagram's really the best way just because it does have all my links to like booking a consultation call and all of that. So it's
Okay,
kind of comprehensive. Yeah.
perfect. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been great. I've loved talking to you.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you absolutely loved this episode, I would so appreciate it if you subscribed and left a review on Apple Podcast, or take a screenshot and share this episode on social media. Don't forget to tag me at tatiana.holistic.coach. The more nervous systems we reach, the more generational cycles we break, and the more we contribute to a kinder and safer world. And if you're looking for somatic healing services, send me a DM and I'd love to chat on how I can support you. I'll see you in the next episode.